Thank you for joining me today. MichaelManicotti.com is the website. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Also, check out MichaelManicotti.com for all the latest merchandise. And my YouTube channel, Michael Manicotti Music. And be sure to subscribe to... Oh, I already said that. Stream all my music on Spotify or your favorite platform by typing in Michael Manicotti. And I was going to sleep, and I try to look at the news before I doze off here, and an article caught my eye. It said that my boyfriend is 5'6", but it doesn't matter. Tinder's height filter divides daters. And I thought, that's interesting. And, this came out in the BBC, and I don't trust the BBC, along with a lot of other media outlets, because, my perception is that they kind of have loaded headlines, they have loaded information, meaning that it's biased per se. My perception is it's more of a liberal publication, but I wasn't sure, so I did some research, and, as the story goes, there's a lot to be said. So BBC News Online, which is where I read this article, is part of BBC, the UK's public broadcaster. It's officially editorial, quote, impartial, but is generally perceived as center to slight left by neutral media bias ratings. For example, All Sides rates it as center but leans left. And YouGov surveys show it's often seen as more favorable to Labour/the left than the Conservatives, the right. However, it's not uniformly labeled by all. Around 20% believes it leans left, and another 20 think it's right. Okay, and what's funny about this is that, then you go down and it says that about 60% of its audience is self-identified as liberal. Okay, whereas 13% is conservative. So it's not far off to see that they would potentially be writing, articles with that sort of stance, because you want to sell to your audience, and I totally get that. But the point is that when you're a news outlet, you're supposed to be objective. And not just that, I was curious, well, let's see what scandals that they've been involved in. And then it gives me a whole list of reporting errors, bias, and retractions. Ethiopia weapons claim in 2010, the BBC reported that funds meant for Ethiopian famine relief had been diverted to buy weapons, citing a CIA report. After Bob Geldof's public rebuke and lack of evidence, BBC issued repeated apologies and retractions. So they're taking responsibility, but they're not really, because the damage is already done, and all they have to do is issue a retraction in the back part of the publication. Okay, so number 2, the Primark child labor documentary in 2011, an investigative report alleged Indian child labor in the Primark supply chains, later acknowledged that it was staged. BBC apologized to Primark suppliers and viewers. So, we could even do research and find out, well, who is Primark? Okay, so Primark is it's a fashion retailer. All right, so that's interesting. Now, I go further, and we go to the third thing on the list, the Petro Poroshenko bribery claim. BBC published a libelous claim that Ukraine's president paid $400,000 to Michael Cohen. After legal action, it withdrew the story, apologized, and paid damages. So it goes on to list 4 more incidents. Actually, why don't I just go ahead and read them? Nigel Farage bank account story. Reported Coots closed Farage's bank account due to lack of wealth. Bank documents later showed reputational risk was the reason. BBC amended and apologized. Oxford Street slur misreporting. BBC reported a slur about Muslims heard on a bus with Jewish use. Police and individuals on the bus later clarified it was a Hebrew plea for help, not Muslim slur, forced BBC to correct and face backlash. So, potentially they shine light on these individuals, maybe damage their reputation, but they only faced backlash and they were forced to make a retraction. See, that's one of the problems with the media, is that they're just making retractions. That's all they're really required to do, unless, they get sued. Mistranslations in the Gaza documentary in 2025. So right up until today, the documentary Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, mistranslated or omitted Arabic words like Yahud, which means Jews, in favor of Israeli forces. It faced criticism and was removed from BBC's streaming service. 7. High volume of Gaza war corrections 2023 to 2025. Since October 2023, BBC issued 60 corrections on Gaza coverage, including 9 full retractions of misleading or, quote, false claims. Okay, I shouldn't even say quote, it just says false claims. Critics claim that BBC breached its own guidelines over 1,500 times in coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict. So it's breaking its own rules. Hutton Inquiry, BBC in 2003, BBC's coverage of the Iraq War's sexed up weapons of mass destruction dossier was strongly criticized by Lord Hutton. Result: Chairman and Director General resigned, BBC's leadership apologized, and it altered its handling of state claims. So who's Lord? It was strongly criticized by Lord Hutton. So let's see who Lord Hutton is. And we just go, boom, Lord Hutton. Baron Hutton of Furness. So it's some sort of like political figure. British politician who served in several offices in the cabinet of the UK. All right, so so there's the foundation. Okay, so we have a publication that we know is manipulating the media. Now, it says it's accused by both political wings, some on the right for pro-Palestinian anti-Israel coverage, some on the left for pro-established right-leaning reporting. Well, we know they're not producing right-leaning reporting because it says by these two websites, YouGov and All Sides, that they're not doing that. So it says that the BBC News strives for impartiality, but it isn't immune to mistakes or criticism, blah, blah, blah. Okay, then it shows more examples as late as 5 and 2 days ago that the BBC rejects White House claim that it removed Gaza story. So by their own self-admission, they breached their own guidelines over 1,500 times in coverage of the Israel-Hamas conflict, but BBC is now rejecting the claim that it removed a Gaza story. So in other words, the data is showing that you are doing this. It's not far off to claim that you're doing this. Okay, so it says that the BBC has been found at times to have crafted or aired content that was later revealed to be misleading, false, or staged, leading to accusations that they intentionally shape narratives, though the network typically maintains that these were due to editorial lapses, not deliberate deception. Here are some notable cases of false or distorted narratives. Oh, wait, I already read this. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, is there more? Okay, so... all right, so then it goes on to talk about the Princess Diana and Martin Bashir interview. And BBC journalist Martin Bashir used false documents to secure the famous interview with Princess Diana. So they're manipulating other people to obtain interviews for content. Okay. Then it relists some of the other ones I already said. Now, it says that BBC has repeatedly crossed the line from reporting errors into narrative engineering, particularly in fabricating materials, airing stage footage, Primark labor, manipulating translations, Gaza coverage, and reporting unchecked explosive claims, Poroshenko and Live Aid. Using fabricated materials, Bashir interview, the Princess Diana thing. Okay, so the case not just shows accidental bias, but instances where BBC either creates sustained false narratives, whether through deception, misrepresentation, or gross editorial negligence. Let me know if you want full citations. Okay, so you can't trust this publication. And, I've talked about other publications like Rolling Stone and how they falsely accused somebody of grape and then they got busted for that. And, it was taken to court and they lost a lot of money because they made false accusations. The point is that I talk about my key concepts, my philosophy, right? That there's something between an honest mistake and deception. Okay. An honest mistake is, for example, the other day, I believe I noticed that I said, one of my statistics, I was talking about tattoos on women. And I said that 67% of women believe that their tattoos make them more attractive. And then I said that, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I said that 95% or 97% of women find men with tattoos attractive. Okay. Or find them attractive on men, whatever. So I believe the actual percentage was what was, maybe I said 95 and it was 97, or it was 97 and it should have been 95. And sometimes I say that, 14% of the men in America are 6 foot tall or greater. But it come to find, I'm sorry, I said that 10% or something of men globally were 6 foot or taller, something like that. And it turns out that I said 10% globally, turns out 14.5% globally are taller than 6 foot. And see, I may even be botching that. The point, I can't remember what the exact stat is. The point is it's very close. And I'm making an honest mistake. So I'm misquoting a stat, but the thing is I'm not grossly misquoting it. If I say 10% and the actual number is 14.5 and it leans in favor of my point, especially, that's an honest mistake. And when you're doing things like engineering narratives and producing false information to get interviews, this is deception. Okay. So, this is going on in the world around us, but the point is that I want to roll into this article because it has to do with Tinder or the dating apps. And the headline that I already read, my boyfriend is 5'6", but it doesn't matter. That's already a charged or biased or inaccurate, blatantly inaccurate statement, but it's someone else saying it, so that's their opinion. That's her opinion. But I could see how they're framing this as, oh, well, if you're short, then it doesn't matter. There's hope for you. But the statistics show that a majority of women, okay, prefer men that are, the average height that a woman is attracted to is 6 foot tall or taller. Okay, so they're trying to position this as, whatever they are, but I can read through this and we can go further. Joe is somewhat shorter than the average American man, 5'6" And the average American man is 5'8" and weighs 199.5 pounds, I believe. But when Ashley came across his Tinder profile last year, the last thing she was thinking about was Joe's height. Okay, so that may have pertained to him specifically, but let's go further. We were talking about our hobbies and our passions, Ashley says, not superficial things. News that the dating app where Ashley and Joe found love is trialing a new feature allowing some premium users to filter potential matches according to their height. It was met with mixed reactions earlier this week. While daters like Ashley worry it might stifle possible connections, others say that the feature might actually help shorter men find a match. But it won't. That's the thing. Is that it's already been proven that women are attracted to men of a certain height. So if you give them the option to choose what they want, the average, all right, of what they're all choosing, this is not going to help short men at all. Okay? So that statement is inaccurate, which is not surprising because I've already given examples of them just making shit up. But whatever. Again, there's no citation to this or anything. And it says others say. Who are the others? Tell me who these people are. What it should say is data says that, but it's not saying that. It's just saying others. Okay? Tinder's trial is running in limited parts of the world, excluding the UK. With the feature only available to those who pay for its two highest subscription tiers. So what's interesting about that is that we know that these dating app companies are not in the business of helping people find love. Okay, they're in the business of making money, and one way in which they do this is that they sell a ticket to go see Sasquatch. One of my other key concepts. This is where the fake gurus get on their YouTube videos, their ads that they spend tens of millions of dollars on, and they say, hey, check out my private jet. You want to be like me, right? Well, if you click this link below, I have a free webinar. And after you watch that webinar, I'm going to try to sell you a $5,000 course that's going to show you how to do this. I'm not really going to tell you what the course is or what it does. And, some people do. But the point is that when they do that, even what they're selling is not congruent with how they're positioning it. So these companies are no different. What they're doing is they're capitalizing on the basic human desire to be loved and appreciated. And they do a great job with it because they make hundreds of millions they make billions of dollars off these apps, these platforms. Tinder, Match, Hinge. And I went into some data on this a while back where I showed the exponential increase in income that these apps have made over the years. I think that in 10 years ago, Hinge made $5 million or something. And then it launched forward and into 2025 and it was making, hundreds of millions. And we can actually easily verify this, of course, by let's look at what the statistics show. So, tell me the statistics for growth of, or just Tinder, because we're talking about Tinder, over the last 10 years. So in 2015, Tinder made $47 million. In 2024, it made $1.94 billion. So it's worse than I thought. And they have real interesting ways to do this. They get you in the app. If you're on Tinder, they want you to pay $2 for a read receipt, so to see if your match read it. And she probably definitely read it if she matched with you. But she's probably going to ghost you, because for whatever reason in her mind, she's now ghosting you. And that's a whole nother subject. The point is that we know that statistically, men are doing really poorly on these apps, whereas women, if they want to do well, they can. So women are swiping on like 5% of the matches, whereas men are swiping on like 50%, you know. And you can even go further into that, and we can find out as a recap. And again, I've talked about this in other videos. So what is the disparity between swiping on dating apps like Tinder? And there's a lot of reasons for this. We know that women are more selective. Okay, so women swipe right. Men swipe right. They like on 60 to 70% of the profiles, whereas women only swipe right on 4 to 10%. Okay. And then it talks about the 80-20 rule, which is another one of my key concepts. So in other words, 80% of the men are only going, 80% of the men are not going to be favored on these apps, whereas 20% of them are going to be favored on the apps. And that is reflected in the average height of an adult male. Women said that 80% of men are below average in attractiveness. Okay, so on Tinder, men need to swipe 115 times for a single match on average, while women swipe only 10 to 15 times to get a match. Women receive hundreds of messages, often ignoring most. Men often message without receiving replies, especially if they're not in the top 10 to 20% of attractiveness status. And even I can testify to this. I can tell you that even when I match with women, and I have stated and showed you on my dating app how I achieve above average results. But the point is that even though that I'm achieving, above average results, I'm still getting these same things happening to me. So this says a lot. And the big thing again is that these apps largely are not working. Okay. So, if I was investing in a stock and, my broker or whatever information said that I'm only going to make money, my chances of making money are 10%. That is a low percentage. It's not very inspiring. So it says here that Tinder just declared war on the short kings, wrote a social media user, while another said they'd been using Tinder height filter to filter out all men taller than 5'9". That's hilarious. You need to tell me which user is filtering out men because they're taller than 5'9". That is absurd by every measure of the imagination and by that measure of the facts. Sorry. So I noticed there's some sort of popping going on in my audio, and sometimes this stuff happens, so I'm trying to fix it. I think I fixed it. So going back to the article. So we can read further. It talks about this gal that's being quoted. Her name is Beth McCall. She's 31. And she says a lot of she makes a lot of unsubstantiated claims. Okay. So, she says that she's a London-based writer and podcaster. And she said the London-based writer and podcaster says it could help people avoid women who only want to date tall men. Yes. And we know, okay, so if you're a dude and you women who so you don't have a choice to pick well, you do actually. I guess if you say their height, then or your height, then they have the ability to select. But it said I don't think you can select it. Well, I don't want to, you can't. In other words, if they're selecting dudes that are 6 foot or taller, or whatever height and taller, or whatever height and shorter, you're not going to be presented with these match. Okay, so they're not even going to show up on your radar, which is funny because uh you know what, one of the common I talked about beneficios mutuos, and what this is that you have these girls that some of them will ask, well, it's specifically in Latin American countries or places like Colombia, and more specifically places like Medellin, who have a very high uh, sex worker ratio. And if you ask for beneficios mutuos, you are a sex worker, because that's sort of like a sugar baby. So you're exchanging money for attention. That makes you a sex worker. And these women are hilarious because, well, not just them. Actually, it's not just them, but a girl will fully, for example, I'll give you an example. She'll say that she's looking for mutual benefits. And I tell her, no mutual benefits. Okay. And then she might be 20 years old, 25 years old, 19 years old. Doesn't matter how old she is. She will then respond and say, well, why are you 40 looking for a 20-year-old? Okay, because she got rejected, right? So she's now offended, and instead of responding logically, of course, she's going to respond emotionally. And the question is, why are you looking for men that are 40? Okay. You wouldn't even see me if that wasn't in your preferences. That's the point. And there are actually a lot of girls that I've encountered that have been quite young, especially on the relationship dating apps, that they're looking for dudes my age. This is not uncommon, but women think it's uncommon. Okay. Some of them. And it's not the same for men versus women. You know, if you're a dude and you can attract a younger female, that's a win for you. If you're a woman and you can attract a younger man, that's a loss for you. Okay? Because a dude that is younger attracted to an older woman, all right, he's there because he wants to smash. And, you know, I have my own personal examples of this. Every single one of the girls that was older than me that I've dated in my life, I have not taken seriously. Okay, so, you know, going back to this article, so she makes this well, let me go further. Women typically don't have a problem with dating shorter men, she says. But they do maybe have a problem with dating a shorter man who's actually hung up on it. Okay? Now, the first statement is false, okay? And the reason it's false is because, again, there's data to show that they do have a problem with that. And, you know, because if they didn't, then the average would not be 6 foot. All right, so this, again, you know, when you read further about her, she's 31 years old, okay? So she's already past her prime. And, you know, a lot of these women, especially these content creators, you know, a great deal of them are single. Okay, so it's single women giving other single women advice that keep them single. And again, it's not the same for men and women. We are not the same. So if I'm single, all right, that's not a loss for me necessarily. But if you're single, that is a loss for you, because we all know that married women with children are statistically more happy. Now, you could say that, yes, married men are also statistically more happy. But the point is that, you know, gals like this typically make these claims, okay, and they don't have data to show that. All right, so if women typically don't have a problem, show me where it says that. And it doesn't say that. Okay, and it says that aside from the filters, Beth believes the real problem in modern dating lies with the dating apps themselves. It encourages us to treat dating like a picking something from a menu, she says. Adding, there's nothing in being a little bit taller that will make a man a better partner. Okay. But we've tricked ourselves into thinking that there's truth in that. There is truth in that. Again, referring back to the data. And you know, from an anecdotal perspective, women, or not even anecdotal, this is also accurate. Women are looking for, you know, what is going to be the thing that when I produce offspring, what are the criteria that are going to give my offspring the greatest chance of survival? And one of them is height, because height projects dominance, and dominance is an indicator of survival. Okay, so features like this capitalize on a well-known preference. Some women desire taller partners. No, all of them, majority of them do. They don't address the deeper issues at the heart of online dating fatigue. And see, this is so funny because I laugh when women talk about dating fatigue, because we've already shown that they're doing exponentially better than men on dating apps, but they're tired. You know, they're tired of getting so much attention. You know, it's just, I don't even know what to say. A man who is 5'7" tall, but confident, kind, and emotionally attuned can be far more attracted than someone who ticks the 6 foot but lacks substance. Lara says. So we have another person, Lara Breadspode. But going back to the other guy, I did more research on her. So she's 31. And it says that she is in a relationship, but it's her first relationship ever. Okay, so, you know, if I'm trying to get advice from somebody as it pertains to this, I might want to look at somebody with more experience. Now, I don't profess to be a relationship expert, but I have been in quite a few more relationships than one. All right. And in addition to that, I am absolutely an expert in attracting people. Okay, because I have endless examples that I've given in all my content. And I was even thinking of doing a video where I show you some of these women so you can see what I'm talking about. So let's find out. Okay, so it just says right there on the thing, she's some sort of like weight loss expert or something. I mean, I don't even want to do research on this person because that's already cringe. She's the founder of Matchmaking UK, a successful 30-year career in PR, blah, blah. Let's read her bio on this matchmaking website. So she's a matchmaker. And we also know that a lot of these matchmakers are quitting or giving up and things like this. And, you know, because they simply can't find men for a lot of these irrational females. She takes an interdisciplinary approach to matchmaking, masterfully blending her skills and collaborating with UK and international matchmakers to find the most suited match. She's no stranger to the realm of love, dating, and relationships. Lara is intimately familiar with the intricacies of her calling. She approaches each matchmaking engagement with a vibrant aura of passion, energy, and empathy. And I assure you that she is not doing this for free. Okay. So, which is fine, you know. But anyway, I mention her because the article mentions her. I don't really want to do more research on her. You can do research on her. Okay, Tinder told the BBC its new filter demonstrates it is building with urgency, clarity, and focus, and this is part of a broader effort to help people connect more intentionally on the app. A spokesperson said not every test becomes a permanent feature, but every test helps us learn how we can deliver more relevant experiences and push the category forward. And that fleeting moment when stumbling across each other's profiles on a dating app can be vital, as Ashley and Joe know. So the other funny thing about this Ashley girl, okay, who found her 5'8", 5 foot whatever he is, 5'6" tall boyfriend. The very first picture of her she has a big tattoo on her left arm. And based on the stats, we know that men find women with tattoos 46% less attractive. So again, this is kind of a situation where you find, like I talk about in the Jelly Roll documentary, that Jelly Roll is overweight. Even after he lost 200 pounds, he's still overweight. I mean, I think he weighs like 390 or 400, whatever. It doesn't matter if he's weighing anything over 185. He's overweight for his height, and he's married to a former sex worker. So basically, what this amounts to is two undesirable people finding each other. And you can call it love, you can call it whatever you want. And I guess that's the goal, right? And I wouldn't even say, in the documentary, I don't say that's the exception to the rule. I say it is the rule. And that, Jelly Roll represents this population that's 5'8" tall and 199 pounds on average for a male. And 90% of males are consuming porn. Okay. So it's not a far-fetched idea for one of these guys who is enamored with this fantasy, when presented with the opportunity to participate or live in the fantasy, he may not turn that down. And so it's two undesirable people coming together. He's overweight, which makes him undesirable. He's not 6 foot tall. Okay. She is a former sex worker, and 90% of men will not date, or 80+% of men will not date a woman who's been associated with any sort of sex work, or they perceive them to be undesirable. So that's the point. So here you have a similar situation where you have two undesirable people, and we don't have data on this, but you could potentially go into this woman's sexual history or others, and you'd probably find a litany of bodies. Okay, so is this a win? Not really. Okay, so it's just a reflection of where we're at. And again, this person is making a lot of unsubstantiated claims. So just because these two people found each other, that doesn't mean anything. They're not married. They don't have kids. They don't have a long 20, 30, 40-year marrying history. We don't know what's going to happen with them. We don't know who's in her DMs. There's a whole varying list of criteria. Now, what I will say, so she says in closing, it says, but for now, her swiping days. Okay. Ashley, the subject of this article, the girl, worries that people who use Tinder's new filter might be cutting themselves off from people who are a potential match for them rather than someone who's their preferred height. Again, women don't perceive men under 6 foot to be a match for them. All right. And that's the thing, is that you can put this little feature on there all you want, but all it's really going to do is further hurt men. Because if a dude gets a girl hooked and he's less than 6 feet tall, there is the potential for that evolving into something. Okay. And that may have been the case here. But if right out the bat, people are judging a book by its cover, they are absolutely going to take things at face value. And I could go so many more directions on this. I think the point is that, again, here we have an article that's positioning something. It's quasi-reporting, quasi-furnishing opinions by way of these other people's perceptions. And, I'm even hesitant to call it a perception. It's kind of an opinion. And it's not rooted in fact. So what do we do from all this? I talk about how, a lot of these people who talk about these subjects, they don't provide any solutions. You know, if you're a short guy hearing this, you're going to think that there's no hope for you. The point is that most people in general don't understand the other things that could potentially serve as an edge for you. You know, and I talk about this one dude in my other podcast and how his girlfriend was about the same height as him. He was extremely small, but he was very stylish. You know, he had a very stylish appearance, and he was, yes, extremely confident. Okay, to the tune of he was practically pimp handing this girl around, and she was submitting to it. And yeah, I'm not saying that's the way to go, but my point is that this dude did not seem concerned, and it's because he understands female psychology. Okay, so are you 6 foot tall? No. But the thing about a lot of people that are tall is they're also lazy. Okay? Like me. I am 6 foot tall. I am wearing a gray t-shirt. All right. You know, I'm unshaven right now, or most of the time in my videos. You know, I look pale-faced and sickly sometimes, or most of the time, based on just how I look at myself in the mirror. And the point is that this is reducing the chances of me potentially attracting a mate, okay? Because we know that women are looking at things at face value. I could be a multimillionaire and roll up in a Toyota Camry, and a woman is not going to treat me the same as if I roll up in a Lambo. She doesn't give a shit. She doesn't care if I own a Lambo and I'm making payments on it, okay? She's saying he has a Lambo, okay? And again, that projects power just like the fake gurus. It doesn't matter what they're selling you. They have reeled you in, okay? Just like these dating apps. But the point is that there is a way to, I'm not even going to say manipulate the system, because you're not manipulating. What you're doing is you're increasing your odds of success based on the information that you've been provided. All right? So, you know, if I'm doing all this research on a stock to invest in or a piece of real estate, I'm going to do my due diligence. So what are things that women are attracted to? They are attracted to style, okay? And you don't even have to have money to have style. You know, they are attracted to unique skills. You know, I talk about the guitar player that they put a guy outside a coffee shop. They had him sit there and try to talk to women as they walk by. They put a guitar in his hand, and all of a sudden, he didn't even play it. His odds or the amount of women that responded to him increased like 60%. So he positioned himself because he knows that these are things that increase his value. So because I am a guitar player, I also understand this and can testify to it. You know, there are a lot of people who want to go be rappers. And because there's so many people that want to be rappers, everybody's a rapper. All right. And because it's easy, everybody's a rapper. Everybody's a DJ. And you could say whatever you want. At the end of the day, those forms of music creation, whatever, they are easier, exponentially easier than learning how to play guitar. And I think subconsciously people know this, especially women. So they don't see a lot of guitar players. So when they see one, they're placing a higher value on it, and value translates into options a lot of times. Not always, but again, so these are things that people that are short can do. You know, even in this picture right here, this guy who's 5'8", he's wearing a nice shirt and a tie. Now, maybe this was for a photo shoot. I don't. And then there's another picture that he's wearing a tie, and he doesn't look like a bad-looking dude, you know? And he's a little bit taller than her. So it's not all for naught, right? You just have to look at what's happening. You know, I met a really pretty girl, and she was 6'1" tall. So she's taller than me. and I'm not attracted to that, and she's not attracted to that. Okay. But the thing is that she didn't have to be because she was married and her husband was 6'5". Okay. So, that's the point. You could potentially have disparity there. So in other words, she became unattracted to me, not because of the way she looks, but because of her height. She was too tall. And so it could work in a reverse way. But anyway, I'm going to close it out there. I think that's kind of what I was getting at. We know these publications put out, false information. They're not really trying hard. And that's not really the point. The point is that they are talking about it. And I brought light to an issue that you potentially need to be made aware of. So michaelmanicotti.com is a website. Come check it out. Pick up some merchandise. Check out my other YouTube channel, Michael Manicotti Music. And also stream me on Spotify or your favorite music apps by typing in Michael Manicotti. And lastly, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. I appreciate your feedback, and I'll see you in the next one.